And we're live. Well, again, we're not live. We're recording.
Right.
I'm Dan Prince.
I am Matt Heelan. It is August the 14th, 2020.
We missed a week, didn't we?
Yes, we did. But we are back to discuss all things around technology and business and
Probably coronavirus.
maybe throw some of that in.
Well, I mean, I think it is affecting business and I think people's use of technology rather drastically at this point. If it's not, you know, maybe we can plant a seed because it should be.
I was reading a story this week about these robots that they are using ultraviolet lights that they used them in China, where they place the robots and they go from room to room and they, through ultraviolet, disinfect the rooms after the people are moved out or whatever. And so, I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, the virus has kind of hit this fast forward button on a lot of technology that may have been out there, but just not being utilized or implemented yet. And I know we talked about this on some other, on a previous podcast, but you know, right now, more and more companies starting to bring people back to work. And now, you know, I mentioned to you earlier, my daughter's getting ready to start going to college this week. And we've been reading up on all the things they're doing, maybe using a little technology to try and keep people safe on campus. So, yeah, I think that, you know, and I think we're seeing, I think what we talked about earlier was we're seeing people coming to us wanting to use technology in a different way to say, Matt, I have to do more with less because of the virus. And the only way that I know how to do that is to use technology.
Yeah. I mean, we've been heading down that road for quite some time, this more with less, right? You've got to compete in business and it's getting harder and harder to compete. So everybody needs to do more and spend less. And I can understand why some technologies right now would be fast forwarded. Right? We've got to save the world.
Right.
But I also think that there is a lot of opportunity at this point because we have slowed the economy down. We have most companies are not doing the volume of business that they were doing. They don't have as many people to deal with, you know, in terms of HR or, you know, making sure you have seats, computers, monitors, disinfecting. Very few companies, I think, are 100% back in the office. They're probably a balance between some remote and some in the office. And I think that slowdown or that lack of full speed ahead as normal opens the door for investment, strategic investment in technology. And every company needs to invest in technology, or eventually, you know, somebody that did invest in technology is going to take over their role. This is the nature of things in the 21st century.
You know, one of the guys that that I've been talking to is this company out of Fayetteville, Arkansas, called I always say it wrong, Weebata. And
is that wrong? Weebata?
No, I think it's right. I always have a hard time saying it for some reason. It doesn't roll off the tongue.
Weebata.
Right. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well as it should. But the whole purpose of his company is to use technology. If you want to sell something in Walmart, or you want to advertise on Walmart.com your product, it's a way for you to push onto Walmart's platform your goods and get advertised so that more people see you. That's the technology that he uses. And we were kind of having an email exchange, and I just said, I can't imagine over the course of the last 90 days the way that your business has evolved because you are so tied into Walmart, right? Because now, if you think about it, you know, obviously an online presence that Walmart had was already really big, right? But now with the pandemic, all these people that aren't going to your store, who are still Walmart fans, are now jumping onto Walmart.com and the traffic now that they are seeing would just be exponentially so much higher. So now his technology's got to work really well, right? Because now there's just the volume, the way we shop has changed, right?
It has.
And so I think he's in a good position, but at the same time, our conversation was more the same flavor, which was, all right, Matt, I got to figure out how to do more with less. I got to figure out how to expand the use of my technology in such a way that can handle the change in consumer behavior. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just Weebata, but I think that's a challenge that's facing every business today.
Right.
If they're still open. I mean, because a lot of places have closed down.
Right. Well, and then there's a certain argument that says technology, how could technology save the restaurant industry, right? So there's a certain argument there that says that certain businesses could still benefit from technology, but there may just be some that technology can't really save their part of that industry, right?
Or maybe that we just haven't put any thought around it. Right. Like, so, what comes to my mind when you say that was a ventilation system that has infrared or what was the light that?
Ultraviolet,
not infrared. I knew it was one of those.
Right. Right.
But yeah, why not have a robot that meanders around your restaurant and shines ultraviolet light, killing whatever is floating in the air, or have a ventilation system that works really well and rejuvenates the air frequently, but also kills the germs that are within it.
Well, right. or even at some point, I've got to believe that at some point we're going to get sophisticated enough to be able to put a device or something in a place that can measure the virus, right? That says in this space, we believe that there's this much virus in this specific square footage or whatever.
Yeah, I wish we had something like that now, where you could just kind of determine, if there's viruses in the air around you and maybe how many of them. That seems like a.
So I don't know if you caught the Duke University article or that Duke University basically, and it was pretty cool how they showed it. I think there were 8 different masks that they put out, one of which, my mask, was very highly rated. So what they did was they had people put on the mask, and then they used, again, I think they used infrared light, and they just measured as people were talking and how much was coming through. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the N95 mask was rated highest. Surgical masks were rated second highest. But the one that was the worst was these neck gaiters, is what they call them, right? They're like fit all around. They said those were actually may increase the virus. They're so bad, right? Because it doesn't stop anything from flowing through, and also
they look the coolest,
right?
Though.
Right. So, but the point being is that obviously Duke University used technology in that capacity to measure how well the masks are performing. So that's got to tell you that we're going to get sophisticated enough to be able to, like I said, put a device in an area. And so right now I'm thinking, we know where hotspots are across the country because of the number of cases that are being reported, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to believe that we're going to get to the point where we can get down to the level of saying, hey, Matt, in Kansas City, you don't want to go to this part of Kansas City because...
I hope we get there. Dr. Birx mentioned this week on the radio that we don't have hot spots in America anymore. We've got a raging forest fire, folks.
Right.
Everywhere across, in every small city, everywhere. If we don't do something and lock down or find a vaccine or something, we're going to see a lot of problems in the next few months.
Yeah, the fall flu, right.
Sure. I mean, I think that's scary to even think of it. But there's enough people that are infected with it now, and there's no signs yet, no indicators that it is, a seasonal thing, right? Because it's still a consistent growth. There's no signs that it's going away, but when the flu season hits, now we got flu and COVID together, you're going to have people with immune systems that are not as strong as they should be. And yeah, it could be really bad.
Right.
I'm praying for that vaccine. Russia just actually approved one, didn't they?
They sure did.
And I know all the news media outlets are trying to downplay it.
Right.
I don't know. We don't like Russia, right? When I say we, I don't mind Russia at all, but I think Americans don't like Russia. It doesn't matter what they do. We're going to talk bad about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, you would think, and maybe this is a bit naive, but you would think that the world would, I forwarded you that that Rolling Stone article that was written by what was his name? It was in it's called "The Unraveling of America" by Wade Davis, and he had an interesting line in there that talked about the idea of, civic duty, right? Of people as Americans, you would think that we would have put aside some of our differences and said there's a collective goal here that we've got to come together on, and that he sees that that's really not happening. That there isn't this sort of like we're all in it together feeling about the virus. We thought that we could all coalesce around the idea of doing what's good for your common man or woman, right?
It's astounding that we don't have that camaraderie. That let's all do this together. No, you've got people claiming that masks don't do anything, and it's ridiculous. I still hear people that I know saying that they're not convinced that this is even a real thing. It's like, I don't know how you can say that, but at the same time, why am I so convinced it's real? I haven't seen a virus. I haven't caught it. I know of people, but I don't know anybody, in my immediate circle of friends or family that have caught it. So there's that. We're not all together still.
Well, and I think that then you throw into the vaccine that what is it? The reported number of people that say they won't get it or they won't take it.
Anti-vaxxers, right? And then you've got the whole Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all that stuff stirring up. It's hard to come together when you are so divided, and not just there. I mean, politically, right? We're polarized as well. So.
Yeah, and I think about that in the context of having kids, right? In that, because I think young generations are looking at this moment in time to say, and especially they look at their parents, and then they look at the way their parents interact with other people around the virus, and I think it's revealing, how in some ways, the way I guess I think about it, it's kind of revealing as far as how you're a leader as a parent, right? In terms of the way that you are responding to the virus, how responsible you are, it's hard to get a teenager to do anything. Convince a teenager that they need to wear a mask in the middle of a pandemic, right? And all the reasons why that should be. And I think they're all going to take their cues from you and the way that you behave, right? I think,
unfortunately, that's the only thing that they're going to take their cues from. You can tell them till you're blue in the face, but if you don't wear it, they won't wear it. Right. That's why I was disappointed that Trump wasn't putting his mask on. If for no other reason, lead the country.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So,
and then Fauci's out in public without a mask on.
Right.
Something else about kids and the way that they're responding to this thing, though, I think that there's an opportunity for younger generations, maybe not teens, but, just early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, to look at this chaos that is our country and the world today, and hopefully take it on themselves to fix it, right? Because they're the ones that need it to be better, right? I need it to be better too, but in the short term, right? They're the ones that have to live their entire lives in this environment. And I'm seeing some very young people step up to the mic and have intelligent conversations about things that our generation might not even either know to talk about or be willing to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think that, much like what we're talking about here in terms of the common good or the collective of the, republic, if you will, to come together to solve big problems, big challenges, it's important for us to understand that listening to the voices from every age range. I mean, if we're thinking about this as far as the virus and every idea is a good idea, then that means we're listening to everybody, young or old, from whatever background they're coming from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some kid in his basement, doing gene sequencing for fun,
right?
Comes up with the next.
Yeah, well, isn't that what happened with? I can't remember, but it's a test, I think, for leukemia or something, and a kid came up with a $2 or $3 tests on his own.
Right. It's like,
is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, stuff like that, where it comes from, it didn't come from some senior scientist at some university. It came from, just some guy playing around with something, or a girl that, had an interest in whatever. So.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about. If you are in that business of producing tests for, medical tests to see if something exists in somebody's system or not, and you've got teens or early 20-year-olds or anybody else using technology to do the same thing, and you're not, you're going to be out of business before long, because it's clear that anybody in their garage can create anything with the access that they have to information today.
Right. Yeah, and one of the things that was going to involve technology, and like right now, I can't remember the number of states that have agreed to use the Apple Android. It's not the contact tracing, but it's just the reporting feature that they've built together. But I just read the state of Virginia this last couple of weeks had agreed to use the app basically that they had created together. But one thing that I had read about a few months ago, which I thought was an interesting idea, was a university in Utah was going to take, because they had canceled classes for that semester. And so they were going to take all these, they were maybe grad students, but maybe they were just seniors. And they were going to say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to create our own contact tracing sort of team. And as part of your, enrollment here at school, we're going to create this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create the program, and we're going to disperse you. So it's going to be like, if you were thinking about like AmeriCorps back in the day, or any other kind of social program like that, where they just take the students and they make them the contact tracers, and they would span out all across the state and begin doing contact tracing. And I thought, and they were going to pay them I think $30,000 a year or something like that. But I thought that was just a really interesting idea. But we've had such a hard time. I read another article about New York City trying to, hire as fast as they can to right.
Well, what's the risk in being a contact tracer?
Sure, because
it seems like you're chasing down the enemy.
Well, and New York City started off by doing it all over the phone. But then we're going to have to move towards, people knocking on doors and, asking people questions. Right. But I guess the thing that it highlights to me is that, the idea of just getting organized, right? It's like, if we know it's a benefit, And it just takes us to get organized in terms of creating. I mean, it's like starting a brand new company, right? Contact Tracing Incorporated, right?
Right.
And so here's what we got to do. We got to use a little technology, and we got to get organized. We got to have a process for how this is all going to work. And the benefits are going to be just, great. And it's amazing to me that there hasn't been a state that hasn't emerged as a leader in that area and said, we're going to contract with private industry or technology because we know that contact tracing is such an important thing.
Because they're broke.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think because they're struggling. But that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say that now is the time to invest in strategically in the use of technology. Not when you need it, right? And right now we need contact tracing technology really bad. It makes me wonder what's going on in South Korea, right? Where are they doing this well, and how are they doing it, right? Let's duplicate that. The technology has to be there already. Why aren't we using it?
Right. Well, and even Dan, when we think about it in the healthcare work that we do, I mean, we're seeing, requests or interest from people to just aggregate a huge data sets, right? And that's really all it is, right? That's what contact tracing is aggregating a bunch of data on a bunch of people, right?
No, I don't think that's what it is.
Well,
I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was rather than looking at it in mass, we are trying to find those veins of people within the the area or whoever,
But if you just took the state of Missouri as an example, and we had a contact tracing program in place, the technology was in place to go gather all that data, we would gather all the data, and then the conclusion would be, now we know where it is, right?
I guess I don't understand what you think contact tracing, what data do you think it's going to gather?
Well, right. As I understand contact tracing, they're going to individual people asking what their symptoms are, have they been exposed recently? Have they gone to the doctor? Whatever the questions might be.
Right.
Right. So that's all data to gather based on the person you're interviewing. Right.
Yeah, and the way that I think contact tracing works is that you start with a sick person.
Right.
Somebody has this virus, and you ask them, who have you been in contact with in the last 10 days? And you take that list of names, and hopefully it's comprehensive, but can't be. And then you go to each of those people and you test them to see if they're sick, and if they're sick, then you find out all the people they've been in contact with and so on, right? Which to me, that's the opposite of big data, right? We're not just gathering everybody's data. We're trying to be really specific about the tests that we're having to send out and who we are quarantining and all that stuff.
But doesn't by the time you go out and do a bunch of that at a high level, that doesn't it tell you something more broadly about?
I mean, it could. It definitely could, especially if you aggregate that across all of the incidences that you are tracing. But in general, it seems like it is the shorter path to
pinpoint.
It's isolating those cases and doing the minimal amount of work necessary to quarantine.
Well, I would just one of the podcasts, what we talked about is applying like machine learning to a big data set to see if we can make some predictions or predict outcomes or whatever. And I would just think that using that kind of technology, it would at least tell us maybe what we should be thinking of or what our next steps should be. Right.
Yeah. And I think it will when we have the ability to test relatively quickly.
Right.
With some accuracy, I guess. There's 3 types of tests out there right now. One of them isn't available to us, and that's a test, I guess, that the White House is using. It's a 20-minute test, and it can tell you definitively whether you've had it and or still have it. And then there's I'm not sure how they test this, but I know it's a 15, 20-minute test, and it's I'm pretty sure blood test, and it can tell you if you have the antibodies that say you are fighting the coronavirus or if you have the antibodies that says that you beat it, right? And that's 15, 20-minute test, but apparently it's only like 50% accurate. And then you got the swab test that takes 2 to 3 days, right? Which I'm not sure how accurate that is, but waiting 2 to 3 days for the results of a test, that isn't going to support contact tracing.
Right.
So
we
need the 20-minute test. That's what we need. And until then, I think we're just going to be hobbling along.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're finding out with our daughter, she's going to go to KU, and they're promising to test like periodically, like every other day or something.
What kind of test are they going to do?
Probably the swab.
It's the most accurate right now until we get the.
And so but it's kind of like you're chasing your tail by doing it that way, right? You're like, okay, well, by the time you test it, you send it off and you get it back, the kid could already have it again, right?
I don't know. We don't even know if you can get it again after you had it, right?
True.
So,
yeah, it's just, it seems to be, I mean, it's the best of the worst choices, right?
In 10 years, we are going to look back and we're going to know exactly what the heck happened. But until then, we're all speculating about it. And it'd be nice to have some tests so that we could start to draw some accurate conclusions. But it's a whirlwind right now.
Yeah.
As far as the disease goes and as far as interacting in public goes, it's just who knows, right? Wear your mask. Stay away from people as much as you can. I don't know if you can tell on this podcast, but Matt and I are like 6 feet apart at least.
I think so.
Neither of us tested recently. So I don't know. We don't have tests, do we? Can we purchase them?
Actually, on my phone yesterday, I got a notification from Johnson County said, if you would like to be tested, here's where to go.
Sure, but aren't those the swab tests?
Probably.
Yeah, and they've got the same thing up at Arrowhead. They have them frequently. And you swab and you give it to them. In a few days, you find out.
CVS does it too, actually. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we should get tested, but I just don't know how that's going to help us on a daily basis if we want to come into the office.
I think there's a lot of fear, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of fear if you go get tested and then what?
And then wait?
Well, and then, no, I mean, obviously you have to wait, but but I mean, you go get tested and then it's like, okay, now I'm positive. Now what? So it's like there's comfort in not having to.
Right.
Right.
I don't know. It seems like
fine. I feel fine. I'm not going to go get confirmation. I shouldn't feel fine.
I think it depends on how comfortable you are with not knowing.
Right.
I'm okay with it because I feel like I think a lot of people in America feel like they already had it. You know, late last year or early this year, I know I had something that lasted longer than it should have that was eerily similar to the symptoms that they described the coronavirus is. But I've heard that from a lot of people, and some of them have been tested and none of them have actually had the coronavirus. So I wonder what that was, because it was something.
Yeah.
It wasn't a common cold.
Okay, so I found this. I've been semi-distracted by trying to find this. So this is the quote. So, how can the rest of the world expect America to lead on global threats, climate change, the extinction crisis, pandemics, when the country no longer has a sense of benign purpose or collective well-being, even within its own national community? Flag-wrapped patriotism is no substitute for compassion, anger, and hostility, no match for love. I thought that was pretty good.
That is a profound quote, but I mean, does he back it up in the rest of the article?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a pretty critical article.
Yes, definitely. And so is this Josh Watkins?
No. That's a different guy I was going to talk about. No, this is the Wade Davis article from Rolling Stone magazine.
What does he contribute the
malaise of it all?
Yes.
You know?
What is he saying the problem is? Is he pointing at Trump?
Yeah.
Is he an anti-Trumper?
Yeah, it's a lot of it. Yeah.
I'm starting to write those guys off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Both them and the devout Trumpers, right? Because it's a fence, and you force people to be on one side or the other of it. And I think we all need to join together, because I don't think any of us need to be extreme conservatists. Why can't I think of that word? We don't need to be extreme liberalist, and we don't need to be extremely conservative either. Those two ends of the spectrum are probably more alike than they are different in their extremism. I think most of us, whether we call ourselves Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, most of us are a little bit of each. We believe, that things should be the way that we believe they are, but we're not 100% Republican. I would like to think most of us wouldn't just buy in and go, well, if it's Republican, it's right. Right. Or if it's Democrat, it's right. And I see too many people jumping into those far end trenches and becoming entrenched in them, so that if you're on one end or the other, everybody looks like they're on the other end to you. Even if they're in your party and they're just not quite as far right or left as you are, they look like the enemy. And that sets us up to be in a fight, right? All of us always in a fight, because doesn't matter. You have to jump from one extreme group to another one to not be in that.
I guess a question that I would have for you, and I guess I was thinking about this a little bit myself. Has there ever been a point in time in your lifetime where you felt like there was a collective common good purpose that everybody rallied around?
Sure. Yeah. 9/11.
Yeah, that's true.
For a little while anyway, until the conspiracy theorists started pointing out that there's discrepancies in the story that's being told. And there probably is some discrepancy.
So you felt like at that moment in time, Republican, Democrat kind of was pushed to the side a little bit and said, our common enemy is this thing.
Honestly, at that time, I wasn't focused on politics. I'm gauging that feeling from the people that I talked to.
Yeah.
Everybody was compassionate to their fellow man during the 2001 9/11 event or shortly after.
Yeah,
it seemed that way to me. Did it to you?
Yeah, it did. I was trying to go back into history, thinking about. I was reading this article the other day. I think it was World War II, where it was some astounding level of productivity in America. Where I think when you grew up in California, but where there was this massive amount of boats being built in a given day, right? Like they would build 4 battleships in a given day or
Boats,
something.
Planes, all of it, yeah.
And to me, that struck me as kind of like, at that moment, it was like, we are focused on the common enemy, and I could care less, or not care less, but it doesn't matter as much to me right now if you're a Republican or Democrat.
Right.
We're just trying to build the boats to get them to help our country.
Not only that, it didn't matter to us at that time because we were so together on this front that we had taken people's rights away from them, right? We apparently our civil liberties were reduced, extremely reduced during that period of time.
Sure.
At least, what is it? Loose lips sink ships.
Right.
We imprisoned a bunch of Japanese Americans, people that were born in this country, and the majority of us were okay with that. We were all together on this. It's ridiculous that we were that together on some of those things, but I'm sure it felt wonderful,
right,
to be one team again.
Right. Yeah, there's this. It's kind of like I don't know if glorification is the right word of the 50s. And I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, every time I hear my parents talk about that era, or I hear people, that lived through that period of time, that was a golden age of America. And my wife was like, yeah, as long as you were white, because, that was.
I mean, how white? I mean, as long as you weren't Japanese. In America.
Right. Or to her point, if you weren't a minority in this country, it maybe wasn't the golden age from their perspective, right?
Yeah, we kind of screwed the pooch on some of that. We had the opportunity to be friends with Russia, right? And instead we decided, no, we need them to be the enemy.
Right.
I don't know why. There is a Untold History of the United States by Oliver Stone on Netflix.
Oh yeah, I haven't watched.
it?
No, I haven't watched it, but I've heard it was pretty good.
I've watched it twice now because it seems to be like a history book. It's fact and fact and fact and fact and fact with very little, hey, let me tell you what I just told you. No opinion or little opinion, little summarization. And you've got to watch it and figure out, did he just take us down that path? And is that the way that our president responded in that issue? I mean, it's pretty surprising. One of the things that I was surprised about is Russia's what the role they played in ending World War II. Right? Apparently, them that pushed Nazis out of Russia, out of Europe, and then we came in after the fact and did D-Day. Right. Well, a lot of people died. That was a historical fight. And we did good, but it did not win the war. In fact, it had very little effect on the war because the war was all but over by the time we launched that thing. Mm-hmm. And that was a strategic decision made by our president at the time. We could have launched earlier. We chose not to.
Right.
You'll have to listen to it to find out all the reasons, but it's not like you can draw any conclusions from that to today. But it's interesting to know that it's interesting to know that what I was taught in school about our history and what actually happened is very seldom the actual truth. We're getting to the point in today's world where we have access to that information now, and we can find out, why did we drop the bombs on Japan? It certainly wasn't to end the war.
Right. Yeah, I guess the thing that I was focused on was kind of, not to get in, I mean, we've obviously talking about politics, but I mean, it is to talk a little bit about just, because it became a huge story again this year, just with the George Floyd story and how Americans, have treated minorities in this country for many years. And I'm just drawing the comparison of the 50s looked great to white America back then, but race relations in the country were still, obviously an issue during that same time period. And then I kind of make the jump from race relations to our business, right? In terms of
why, how do you do that?
What is the level of diversity within the software development community?
That's an interesting question. I'd say it's probably relatively low.
Right.
I'd say it's probably mostly white, probably mostly male.
Right. Right. And so then that's what I'm saying is that those are all kind of connected in my mind, right? Is that, what is our role, or do we have a role in making sure that our industry is more diverse, right?
I don't know, man. I have tried to make it diverse in my efforts, but you work with the resources that you have available to you.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things that I always key on that you've talked about is, the barrier to entry to become a software developer is what do you have to have? A computer, right? And you have to have at least the intellect to understand how to do the job, right?
I mean, you can gain it, right? I mean, so that's how I started. Right. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have internet access. I went to a pawn shop and I bought an old computer, an old slow computer, for a couple $100. And I set it up and I realized, I can write batch files. And I wrote a batch file that would just spin up and use up all the memory and then unspin. And I thought that was so cool. And that's how I started. But so there's some kind of, you have to have some kind of desire to get into it. Most people get into technology, I think, because that's where the money is. Mm-hmm. And that's where the job security seems like it should be.
Right. But I was just what I'm trying to square in my brain is that if the barrier to entry is so simple, then why isn't the community more diverse?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd hate to even speculate, but now we have groups of people, Black Lives Matter, I think, that seemingly represent Black people, and they're trying to shut down STEM. Right. Isn't that the most likely avenue for people to get into technology?
Why would they be motivated to shut down STEM?
For a lot of reasons, but they say, I think the argument is that it supports white people more than it supports Black people. And
yeah,
I'm not sure that it does. I mean, I just said to you that, it seems like it's mostly white and mostly male.
Yeah, I mean, this brings up one of the topics, Dan, I interestingly enough, that I had on my list to talk about, which was our experience with the every software development company, as I understand it, uses a different model to find their talent, right? And so, one model that we've used is here in Kansas City is we've hired all local developers, and we still use on our current projects we still use local developers. But then, because of the nature of our industry, you pretty much can be a developer anywhere in the country and get work through Upwork or all these other ways, right? So the idea of you having to be local doesn't really matter as much.
It kind of disappeared with the lockdown.
And then you go even broader than that, and you say, well, actually being in the U.S. isn't really a limitation. Actually being outside of the country, as long as you have the skills to be able to deliver what we need you to do. And I guess we've experimented with both models. I guess, in your opinion, is one worked out better than the other?
Well, I can say that we have experimented with both models, but not in this environment. As soon as, first of all, having local developers is necessary if the people that you're working with want to see those developers and know that they're here, right? I think there is a lot of worry amongst people that haven't done a lot of work with a particular agency like ours, that once they have a product built, they won't be able to support it because their offshore developer has moved on, right? And when you have local developers, then chances of them moving on seem less likely. I don't believe it is less likely. And so that's what my experience was using local developers, is that the expected security that comes with it wasn't really there. Because they can come and go just as quickly, in fact, more readily than offshore developers or developers that are in countries where they necessarily don't have the upward mobility or flexibility to move from company to company.
And in my opinion, having seen both, having seen us work in both models, is it's not as if it's an either or option, right? I mean, the way we look at it, in my opinion, is if we happen to find a really good developer and they just happen to live in Kansas City, great.
Right.
If they also happen to live in Ukraine, then great too. Right.
I don't care. Other than the language thing.
Right. But if a client came to us and let's say, and this is possible, I suppose, they came to us and they said they had a preference that you have all local developers, or because they contributing to the local economy, maybe the argument goes, right?
Yep.
It's not as if we would say, oh, sorry.
No, I can do that. I mean, I'll build that team however they want it to be, unless they're racist or unless they're building it for reasons that I just don't think are right. And I'm just not going to do business with them. But when the world changed in March, or February, or wherever, whenever you think it changed, it clearly changed. It opened up a whole new set of opportunities for us in a lot of ways. And I think it did so for many companies, but all I can talk to directly is mine. for my company, right, we try to deliver the best customer service that we can imagine, hopefully surprising our clients with the level of customer service that we have. In the past, in order to do that, you had to have somebody that was here because you had to send them to the client. You had to sit in front of them in their office. And so how they dressed,
how they interpersonal reacted,
their body language, all of those things made a big difference. And it makes very little difference today. I mean, I think body language still matters, but it's less about how you present yourself in person and more about how you present yourself online, more about how your audio sounds and how your video looks and the cleanliness of your bedroom, if that's where you're broadcasting from, or the fact that you're in your bedroom instead of your living room or kitchen or wherever you're at. All of those things now become the nuance details that affect your ability to deliver good customer service. And now we can look all over the world to find those people, right? When, instead of just here in our local area.
Yeah. So there's a company in Chicago called Basecamp. I always forget the guy's name. His name's Jason, I think, who started that company. He wrote a book a few years ago called Remote. And he talked about how they went to like an all remote company. I don't know, it's been now probably 5 years ago, and how they literally went through all the trials and tribulations of what a remote team and how they work and being productive and just all the challenges that go into it. And the only thing I think about is that that, you know, when offshoring first became a thing, like, you know, that we were doing, I mean, it was very popular at the company I worked at in the 90s to offshore to Vietnam and to offshore some stuff. And offshore got kind of a bad name because of American jobs. And, you know, there was that whole argument there. But it kind of, over time, kind of began to maybe be less and less relevant.
I agree with that.
But
not less and less relevant. I think the skill of people that were jumping into this for financial reasons got better and better.
Yeah.
It used to be you couldn't trust any code coming from another country unless you had somebody here to review it and make sure that it did what it said it was going to do, because it could be all smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's far less prevalent today.
And I'm just wondering if, when you're saying the world changed in March, that somehow we've made it easier to, in our minds, accept the idea of, if everybody's remote, the idea of offshoring is irrelevant again.
Yes.
Right? Because now we're all kind of offshored, right? In a way.
Right. And I love that. I think that's absolutely true, because we're remote. When you're remote, you're remote, right? And if you're remote, if, let's say, you and I chose only to work with remote people in this city, we're going to have to pay a lot more, which means our clients have to pay a lot more too. And it may be very likely, probably 50-50 chance that what you get is going to be less than what we could have got if we were working with somebody else that wasn't here local.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's the huge benefit to me. What I see is that we can find better people. We can find better people that are more likable and produce better code quicker, support it better. I mean, those are the gems that I look for even when I hire locally.
Right.
Right. Not everybody that comes in here and can code can do the job.
Right. The sort of ancillary benefit to the virus, I suppose, if there is one, which is that now they're seeing people that are saying, I live in San Francisco, I work for Facebook, I work for Apple. Now that we're all remote, it's less and less important where I live, and I can go move to Idaho and do my job. Mm-hmm. Cost of living is half, right? But now I can live in Idaho and make a decent living. And then you're seeing a little pushback from the company saying, well, hold on a second. Maybe what we'll do is we'll decrease your pay.
So that's common. But why do you think they're pushing back? Just because it's cheaper? They're paying them as though they're a New York resident or whatever, and now you move.
Right.
So my son works at Indeed, lives in Austin. And now he's remote 100% of the time. I said, dude, why don't you move back home? Why don't you move back to Kansas City? And he said, well, I have to stay, according to Indeed, he has to stay in a city where there is a presence, an office. Well, they have them all over the world. There's one in Japan, there's one in Germany. And so he's going to move. He's probably going to move to Germany. He took German in high school for 4 years and also went over and visited Germany for the summer. He loves it there, and they have an office there. Yeah. I was a little bit sad. But at the same time, man, you get to go to another country and live there, and they're going to pay him relative to where he lives. And I don't know what Germany's like, but it doesn't matter to him. He's more about the experience. I don't think he's more about the experience. I think he's got his finances under control. He's not worried about that.
Right.
And so he can go anywhere he wants, and as long as he's not making, a third of what he was, he'll be fine.
Yeah, and reading about the remote sort of evolution here. I mean, I think about, years ago, IBM kind of did the whole remote work thing, and then they, to your son's point, then they kind of backtracked on it, and they said, well, you need to live within a certain radius of an IBM office so that if you do need to come back to work, you can. So they took a bunch of people who were IBMers and they had given them this great benefit of working from home. And then they said, no, hold on a second. They did the same thing at Yahoo too.
My sister worked for IBM for, I think, 22 years.
Yeah. And so
remotely. I mean, all but about 2 years of it. So
now the current message from Facebook's and some of the larger tech companies is next summer is when we're going to have you come back. And I just have to believe that somebody has looked at the equation of office space to cost and said, why? Why don't we get rid of the office space, leave these people working remotely, and we make more money?
Right. Which is exactly what I want to do too, if I can get out of this lease.
Right. So
if you're listening,
building management people,
yes, property manager, I would love to.
Yeah, but I mean, and so what as that translates to the stock market is what they predicted is by the time they pad all those possibilities into some of these companies' profit and loss, is that come next year you'll see a dramatic increase in companies' profitability because they will have made that flip that switch, and they're gonna be more profitable because their office space or their rent line item is going to be much lower.
Yeah.
So they expect the stock market to go up in a lot of respects because of that.
Well, Trump says it's already ticking up quite dramatically, and you'd think it'd be tanking right now. So I think there is all kinds of opportunity available at this point because of the things that we're experiencing. I mean, it's terrible in a lot of ways, but like anything, like yin and yang, right? There's also huge opportunity in this. And for me, it was just that. Now I can find the best people worldwide as opposed to the best people within arm's reach.
The challenge that it presents is, it pushes our skill set in terms of managing the work, right?
What do you mean?
Well, what I mean is that imagine, a year ago, was it easier to manage the work because we had people in the office? Is it harder now because we don't have people in the office to manage the work? And in some ways, I don't think it is. But in other ways, in terms of engaging with your employees it's challenging us to have to think about different ways to do that remotely versus in person, right? So if, as an example, if you've got an employee who's not performing well, was that an easier conversation to have in person, or is it harder now because we have to have that over Zoom, right?
Right. And it could be either of those depending on who has to have the conversation.
Right. Right. But I'm just saying, just purely from a management of resources perspective, I'm reading a lot about, how if you remove my ability to manage people in person, I'm afraid that I've become a less effective manager.
Sure, there's a lot of fear around there, and you probably have in the short term. But I think what it also gives you is the opportunity to practice how to manage people remotely, and how to engage with clients remotely in a way that is satisfying to them. We, how we are as people. We read micro expressions, we read body language. We have become really good at understanding other people's feelings and emotions without them having to say anything. And I know you know that because you read a lot. Not everybody realizes the extent to which they focus on these micro expressions to determine, what somebody's mood is. But this having to walk down the street and see people in masks or go into a store, I've begun to very easily see somebody's, whether they're smiling or smirking or, you start to see other parts of their expression that you didn't see before and map it to that meaning.
Right. And you said this before, but eye contact, right?
Yeah.
Reading people's eyes is becoming like a thing, right? A little bit more now because, the darting of the eyes back and forth shows concern or worry, right? Or, I'm translating that.
They're evading.
Right.
What I said last time, and I'm noticing it still today, and I think it's funny, that people are putting their masks on and they're trying to, keep from breathing your air. But I don't know that they can adequately represent themselves as only protecting themselves from your air. It seems like they don't want to look you in the eye. They don't, they will look down at the ground or at something else because they don't want to engage. And I don't think it's that they don't want to engage. I think it's that they're wrapped up in protecting themselves and they think looking at you might infect them.
Right.
Or, I don't really think they think that. But I think subconsciously they associate it with, well, I'm putting a barrier between us, so why would I look at him?
Right.
I think.
Here's the funny thought, though. I have not yet had an argument with anybody in a mask.
That's true.
Because
I haven't either.
Because I'm just thinking you just would get so heated, talking so fast into your mask or whatever. But
yeah, I don't really have arguments with people anyway.
I'm simply saying though that
I haven't seen any.
Right. It's like you think about what you're comfortable communicating, before you had to wear a mask, right? Because I could easily convey to you, Dan, I'm in a great mood. I'm happy today and things are great. Or, if I'm in a bad mood now, how are you able to?
It's relatively easy to see in people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Less so today.
Yeah.
Let's take a little bit of break.
Sure.
And then we will be right back. And we're back. What did you want to talk about next,
well,
Matt? I've got a few things on my list.
Yeah, I had. I've just been having a lot of conversations recently with people about healthcare, and when I mean people, I mean people, researchers at hospitals, hospital administrative people,
prospects.
Yeah, and one of the things that occurred to me was. How many years did you work at Cerner, Dan?
I worked there 2.5 years the first time, about 1.5 years the second time, and about 1 year the third time.
When you walked away from that experience, did your opinion, like before you worked there and then after you worked there, did your opinion change of the healthcare system? Of the
healthcare system? Well, a little bit.
Yeah.
My opinion definitely changed on Cerner.
Sure, but
of the healthcare system, I really, and this isn't a knock on Cerner at all, but when I went in there and looked at the solutions they were providing to hospitals, it made me wonder why that was the best solution for the hospital, right? It seemed kludgy, it seemed old, it seemed like it didn't work all that well.
Right. Yeah, the reason I ask is because what I'm finding as I am out there talking to people is and this is not some revelation of any sort, but is just how disconnected everything is in the healthcare system as a whole, and how, going back to the pandemic, and how now there is this much more emphasis, I guess, around getting it to I know the term of interoperability is thrown around a lot, but I feel now that it's like we woke up and we said, wow, this is just this patchwork of technology that is not easy for us to work within, because now there's this thing overlaying it, right? You take a healthcare system and the way that it's built, right? Then you lay on top of that this urgency of a pandemic and increase of people accessing healthcare, and it's like it's not built for volume.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think that has been evident for a while.
Yeah.
Right. That's my view of it. The pandemic happening, I'm kind of amazed at how well we've done.
Yeah.
From a medical standpoint, right? The fact that we have several vaccines in the works, and it takes 10 years to create a vaccine on the normal.
Right.
Like, how did we do that? I'd like to determine that, because I'm still a little bit scared that we didn't. Right, that this is another, I say another, right? I don't know if the landing on the moon was a conspiracy theory or not, but it seems unlikely that every vaccine we've ever came up with has taken, 5 to 10 years, and that's, I think, being generous. But all of a sudden we can do it in a few months. Right. It makes me question it makes me feel like there's a conspiracy behind it.
Right.
If there's a conspiracy behind landing on the moon, maybe this is a little more obvious.
Well, or the thing that we fundamentally find out is that our process for generating vaccines was broken in the first place.
Might be. It could be, right? I certainly don't know. It scares me to think at this point, all of a sudden we can create a vaccine in just a few months and it works, means that we either knew what we were doing before we did it, like we knew the vaccine that needed to be created because we created the enemy or the virus. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
But that is startling.
Yeah, I think there's been a bazillion reports out there that talks about the waste in healthcare and in terms of dollars spent versus benefits and all that.
Yeah.
And whether that be on the healthcare side or whether that be on the research side. And the one example that I always think about is where you've had this experience, I'm sure too, where you give a person a task and they use an old system or an old process to fulfill that task, right? And then you examine the process that they're following and how they're executing the task within the system that they're using. And then you give them a new task or the same task and a new process or a new system to be able to do it in. And what it makes you realize is the old way of doing it was built wrong. Right? Because now we can with a new process, with new technology, we can triple the output of that same task that they were doing, right? And that's the comparison I'm using with healthcare and with vaccines. Is what we're finding is that maybe the old way of delivering healthcare, delivering a vaccine, all we really need to do is reinvent the process and maybe use some technology, and we would be amazed at what we could produce in terms of whether it be care or how we deliver care or a vaccine or whatever.
I do believe that is true across the board in healthcare, but I have a hard time thinking that it's some of the things that we have put in place to develop vaccines and the trials that we have to do, we did that for a reason.
Right.
Now, maybe we were a little too overcautious at that. Let me restate that. In the past, the situation that presented itself and the way that we went about developing vaccines were probably in alignment with respect to what was needed, the urgency, and how quickly we produced them. And today, in today's world, it may be that, hey, we don't have time to be cautious.
Right.
Let's get out there and get something and let's get it into people and see if it helps. A few lives may be lost or some deformed people might occur, but at least everybody won't die. Right. So, I certainly don't know. I hope that there is 9 years worth of inefficiency in creating vaccines so that this one is legitimate.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at. And one of the things that the stat that I always find kind of staggering was and I know you know that I'm a big telehealth person, but is that the stat that like it was like Mayo or some of the big they said we went from doing X number of appointments over the phone or virtually, that this pandemic pushed us forward 10 years in terms of we are now just seeing thousands of people in telehealth, right? And so so wasn't it possible before the pandemic?
It was, but I mean, it's just as easy for them to get up and go in and talk to their doctor in person.
Right. But that's what I'm saying is that change in the environment changed that overnight. That's what sparked the change in the system, right? And so now there's this rethink of this realization, I think is the best way to say it, this realization where on both the provider's end and on the patient's end, that they go, oh, yeah, we can do this. Yeah,
a little more willingness to adapt. Yeah.
Right. Well, actually, I can give you that exam right here, just, whatever. And just all the articles that I've been reading in terms of elder people that are older, right, elder care, they're doing virtual visits for people who have Parkinson's disease, people who are, likely, fall, people are likely to fall, right? So now you don't have to make a person who's likely to fall, get in a car, come to your doctor's office, right? They just got to get on the couch and have right?
They may not even have to get up out of bed, right? And so they don't have to risk. There's all kinds of risks that we don't quantify when we think about those things. I think there is, in the same way that telehealth has kind of come in to save the day for healthcare, because they still get to bill, for an office visit or whatever it is, they get to stay in business now because they can do it remotely. But I think that benefit, that efficiency was just sitting there waiting for them to take advantage of it. And this has kind of forced them to open their eyes. I think a lot of companies have those kinds of efficiencies available to them, and they just kind of, our paper process works just fine. We've done it for years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the downsides to the telehealth movement that it's highlighted has been the availability of technology to all parts of the population, right? So if you're an old, my parents are in their 70s, right? And they've got a computer and internet access. So, they're able to do it. But if you're an older person that's on a fixed income and don't have access to a computer, or you're, lower income and you don't have access, then obviously you can't take,
do you think
maybe it should be a national mandate around everybody? It's an American right to have a computer, right?
I think there should be. I mean, I think it should be worldwide.
Right.
I really do. I mean, in today's world, the ability to access the information, it is a benefit. It's not a benefit to the majority of us, but not having it is such a detriment that it's ridiculous that we don't have it. 57% of the world has internet access. That means 43%, 4 out of 10 people don't have access to the internet.
Right.
I don't know if they have access to a computer or not. I'm assuming not, because why would you have a computer if you don't have internet?
I signed up for by the way, the Elon test of the...
Yeah?
Yeah, for the internet access. So...
Did you buy a truck too?
I did not. It was cheaper to get the internet access. No,
well,
but
it's only $100 for the truck.
But it's so the idea of it is like a band of satellites, right, floating in the sky, but it's not going to be like a direct TV delivery model, right, where you have to have a satellite in your yard or something.
I don't know how it's going to work, but I do know that it is a mesh of low altitude satellite,
right,
close proximity satellites,
right. And so the beta starts, I believe, in this next quarter. So if you've signed up for the beta, they're gonna roll it out to you, and you're gonna be able to test it.
Is it going to be fast?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see Elon doing anything that wasn't better than what we had. So
I forget what the numbers were around what the speed of it was going to be, but I mean, now the component that you're talking about, if the two components that we need are a physical device and an internet access, well, if Elon solves part of the pipeline, and then all we got to do is get the rest of the population access to a Chromebook or something,
Well,
so
they have access to it right now,
right?
Because apparently just about every country has their own online shopping platform, like Amazon or Alibaba or something similar to that,
right? Which
I think is amazing, considering that 43% of people don't have internet access. Yeah. They might all be in one country.
Right. Well, are you surprised at the low level of internet access merely because we're all consumers, and that you would think that most companies would want to broaden the internet access so we can expand our consumers?
Yeah, but there's a diminishing return. And so, like anything else, I like to stay in the 80-20. I like to use the 80-20 rule. 20% of the effort to produce 80% of the results. If you get into the 80% of the effort to produce 20% of the results, you have to really have been making a lot of money.
Right.
Because I used to live in Reeltown, Alabama. REEL. It wasn't a real town. It was a real town.
Oh, I gotcha.
Because there was a couple catfish ponds there. Yeah. And there was no internet access there. You had to dial in to Auburn or to Montgomery to get connected. This was, 20 years ago. But from what I understand, I still know people that live down there, and the best that they can do is like DSL.
Oh.
DSL, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
it's been so long ago.
But that's such an old technology that they're not downloading these videos and watching them. They don't have access to the kind of information that we do because they get it a lot slower. Mm-hmm. To download what I just did, while I'm on this call with you or on this podcast with you, would have taken them 30 minutes.
Right.
So even if you have access to it, it doesn't mean that you can utilize it as fully as other people can. And if you can't, then you're at a disadvantage. So for equality in the world, I think two things, and one of them is political. I think we all need access to broadband to be able to access the internet. Cheap computers are available, so I don't think we need to provide those to people, but we do need to give them access, because somebody is not going to pick up and move from Reeltown, Alabama just so that they can have access to the internet. And if that did happen, that they started to congregate in areas where bandwidth occurred, that would be a travesty, I think.
Sure.
Because I would move out to the country and figure out how to get broadband.
Well, there was even a big push under the Obama administration that there was like this whole push to put broadband in rural America, and and I'm not sure if that program ever.
It didn't, and the Democrats have revitalized it since this, right? Yeah. Because this is a big thing right now. Sure. A lot of people can't get online to sign up for their unemployment.
Oh, right.
Some, if they don't have internet access, then, or if their little mom and pop broadband company or dial-up company is sick or close their doors because they're staying at home, it shut down a lot of the rural areas in our country. Yeah. And it's terrible. So I think we do need to look at a bigger, it's a utility, and it should be guaranteed to us. Yeah. Just like water and electricity. And did you hear about Mayor Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles, I haven't.
He's threatening to shut off people's water and electric if they have large gatherings at their house.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. That's what I said. I don't even know what I think about it. I don't want people having large gatherings at their house. Especially in the midst.
How would you do that practically?
Practically, you call the company that supplies their water and say, go turn them off.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is that assumes that they're having a large gathering. So what is it, like you're a cop and you show up at the large gathering, you call the mayor and say, hey, shut their water off?
I do not know. Apparently, this is directed at people in Beverly Hills. So,
I don't know. That seems like a lot of coordination.
It seems like a violation of our civil rights.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
We have the right to utilities, and you can't shut them down just because we choose to be unhealthy or unsafe or, right? There's no law that says you can't have large gatherings. If they wanted to prevent that, make a law.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting to one of the things going back to the way that they look at some of this, I think it's when people have talked about Facebook, they've talked about it, regulating it like it's a utility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And regulating some of the larger tech companies like they're a utility, right?
I can't imagine Facebook being considered a utility.
Yeah.
YouTube maybe.
Yeah. Right.
Because you
like
consume
PBS or something.
You consume
right,
that more.
Right.
Facebook is
a little right. But I
guess it's like a community center, an online community center.
There you go. Yeah. So
for old folks.
Right. I mean, who uses Facebook anymore? Jeez.
My mom does.
Right. So did you have anything on
I love you, Mom. Don't take that bad.
Right. Yeah, I go on it to find out what my parents are up to. So did you have anything on your list that you want to talk about?
Did you hear? Well, no, not big things. I kind of wanted to talk about ways that companies can take advantage of this slowdown to redirect their efforts and, pave the cow path, so to speak. That's a really old term.
I
never heard of it?
No, I've not.
This is early 2000s. Maybe it's because I'm in software development. And it used to be that companies that wanted to invest in technology, they would look at their current processes. Let's call it a paper process. And one person fills out part of a piece of paper and then they put it in interoffice mail
right.
so that it gets picked up by somebody else and carried to another interoffice mail bin and gets put in it. And then that person adds something to the document. And when they come to us and they want us to help them, hey, we want to make this paperless. Right. The way that they usually go about doing it is they say, no, we want it to come to this person first. And then the electronic part is that we'll just email it to this person second, and you cut out the paper part. We call that paving the cow path, because if you look at a process and you just make it electronic, when cows travel from here to there, they do so because it's easier for them to take each step in the way they do. And cows can't really climb big hills, nor can they go down really steep hills without risking falling down and breaking themselves. So they walk. If you've ever seen a cow path, I'm sure you have. You live in Missouri.
Yeah, right.
They're rather windy. And so if you're going to create a process, which is the paving part, right? If you're going to create a road from here to there, don't pave the cow path. Design a straight path that is efficient and goes straight there, right? So,
I see.
Paving the cow path, right? Okay. Don't ever do that. Create a superhighway. If you have the money, create a road. If you have more money, create a highway, right? And the difference between them is that you put more thought into the process and streamlined it so that it's cheaper to do and less prone to error. So any of the steps that you can cut out of it means that there's one less point of failure in there. And so I think in today's age where things have slowed down a little bit, there's more ability to rethink that entire process and redesign it from the beginning to the end in a way that produces better results more efficiently with less risks. And the reason I say that there's more opportunity in today's world because of the slowdown is because some of the biggest challenges that I've faced in creating solutions for companies, especially larger companies, is that they spend a lot of their time managing people and managing processes, so much so that change management has become a discipline all in its own, right? How do we implement a change in a big company? Even a small change in a big company is a big endeavor. So it seems to me that when you have a slowdown in your company and combine that with massive amounts of change in the way people work at that company, that there is a tendency already to embrace change, and that change management would become less of a factor anytime that you make changes in that company. And so the opportunity is wide open, in my opinion, for most companies to go, you know what? Everybody that was dedicated to doing it a certain way,
right.
Now they're not. Now
right.
They might not be.
Right.
Now they're probably less dedicated to, nope, it's got to be this way and only this way.
Well, and I would even argue that there's other maybe smaller to medium-sized businesses that are faced with the same question, but their decision-making is change or die.
Right. Well,
either we change the way we work and use technology to improve, or we're not going to be in business in 6 months.
Yep. Somebody in their garage using technology is going to put you out of business because it's not even creating a better mousetrap anymore.
Right.
It's creating a completely different mechanism that reduces the need to have mice traps or mousetraps or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with that every company has the benefit sitting in front of them, the potential to do a lot better, and the risk that if they don't, they'll fail or ultimately be out of business. The bigger companies can weather it a little longer, right? But I think if they're going to take advantage, or if they're going to do it, right now is probably the best time. If they're going to make some strategic changes that involve increasing their use of technology, that they should do it right now, where they don't also have to bring in change management folks.
Let's assume for a second you have a technology project, kind of like you're talking about, in terms of, we know we have to do it. We know we need to do it to be more efficient. We have all these motivating factors that are pushing us to do it. Is the assumption true that if I work in and I don't know if even size matters, that if I've
heard it did.
That if I want to get that project done, it's true that it's easier if I outsource it to a company than if I try to get it done internally? Let's assume for a second that everything's equal. I've got 4 developers in-house. I have 4 developers. I have this company I could go hire. Mm-hmm. Here's the project. I have options. My option is to use my internal team or go outside. How am I evaluating which one is going to be more successful, right? Because there's a lot of cases that I've run into where I've talked to people who've said, oh, I could never use my internal team to do this. There's no way, because whatever. We got too many projects, too many competing interests, whatever it is. And then there's another argument on the other side of that says I couldn't outsource this project because cost is too high, the risk is too high if we fail. Mm-hmm. There's cases to be made for both, I guess.
Well, I've heard cases made for both. Right. I agree with some of them. So let's talk about companies that have internal developers or an internal project management team.
Right.
Let's say that you're a small company and you're starting out, and I'm assuming this isn't a technology company, but a service company or any other company that uses technology and doesn't create it. So this is a technology or not a technology company, but they need technology to do their business, and so they've hired somebody, right? Whether it's a IT person or a developer or a project manager or something like that. They've hired them because they need them. Maybe they've hired 2 or 3 or 4 because they need them. And now they have this project, right? Hey, I want to try something new with technology. Chances are their team is busy doing something because that's why they hired them. Chances are that if they're doing something different now, or they're wanting to do something different, that their team doesn't have that skill set. Their team has the skill set that they hired them for and that they're using currently.
Right.
So to take the leap and say, hey, let's disrupt our team and get them to do something new. You're taking a big risk that they can, first of all, that they will be able to figure out even how to do it. And much more, that they'll be able to do it in a way that's successful, right?
Right.
You pick up new technology, you're going to fail at it a few times.
Right.
And so always outsource the projects that you're going to do once. Why would you bring them internally unless you have resources sitting there idle? And you're willing to take that risk, right? Now, if you've got let's say you got a couple developers and they're sitting there idle, that's probably costing you about $300,000 a year. Rather than hire a company to write you a program for $300,000, sure, use your internal resources. They're not doing anything anyway. And let's see that they do get the project done for $300,000, which is, they got it done on time.
Right.
Chances of that project being done as well as an external company is probably a little bit lower. And that's an assumption on my part. I'm saying that it's going to be lower because chances that those 2 developers that you put on it were geared up and trained to do the work that you wanted them to do is probably pretty slim. Because if they were doing it, then maybe that's a bad way to say it, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're busy working on Visual Basic and you're wanting them to do something in the web, right? They don't know how. And even though they can learn and, you're already paying them, so why not? The chances that they're going to learn it and produce optimal results is probably pretty slim.
Right.
So I would say always outsource projects, never outsource your work. Right. If you require developers to be in-house, to maintain code, to update database tables because your system isn't a closed loop system or whatever it is, keep them doing that. But don't ask them just because they're developers. Maybe they can develop this new project or product. No, you need product developers to develop product.
Well, and I also think that if you're just measuring the productivity of a group of people, I'm now going to throw this project in and it's going to cause a huge distraction as they go out and learn how to do it. That's going to take their eye off of some other thing that we had them focused on. So now all of a sudden we become a less productive group of people, right? Because of introducing this other thing into their world.
Less productive means you spend more money doing less and getting less profit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, has there ever been a case where somebody has said that, hey, illumisoft, we want to outsource this, and we looked at them and said that's a bad idea?
Well, yes, it's been a number of times.
Yeah.
None of them came to me and said, hey, illumisoft, we want to outsource this. But there has been a number of times that they've asked us to do something or build something or create something to solve one problem or another where we told them, no, we can't. We can, but it's not the best thing for you to do.
Right.
Some of the things that come to mind are, some of the things that we've turned down are people that want to do things that we think are ethically wrong.
Right.
Tried to use an unword. No, just wrong. Just wrong.
There you go.
And sometimes where we have told people, no, you're going to spend a lot of money to do this, and I don't see that you're going to make any money off of it. I mean, let's do something else first. Let's prove that there's a market for this product, or prove that people are willing to pay what you think they're going to be willing to pay before we invest all that money in it. And then when we actually helped them make those determinations, they found out, oh, I guess people don't really or there's something else that exists, or,
Right.
And then the last probably category of people that we turn down pretty frequently are the people that want us to take on their risk.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that in a couple different ways. One of the ways they do it is they ask us to partner with them in new endeavors. Like we have even if they're a successful company, we have a new idea. We want to spin off a subsidiary to do this. We need somebody to develop the product or, part of the product. And we're willing to give you half of the business or a third of the business or whatever it is,
Right.
If you'll invest all this money. Sometimes those might actually turn out to be good. But if I was a VC investor, I would definitely jump into them. But I'm not. I'm a software development company, and I really think I'm more of a customer service company that happens to do software development. I say I mean illumisoft.
Right.
But the way I approach clients personally, and the way I hope that we do as a company is to be their guide, their technology guide, and their technology partner in the sense that we want to help them accomplish their goals, not become partners with them in financial partners with them in taking some of their risk of creating a new endeavor. I will say that we can definitely reduce their risk just because of the experience that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I've talked about that before on the podcast, but I will do it again, just in case. For those people that don't understand this fact about the world, in the last 20 years, the number of software developers has grown exponentially, right? So I think in like 2004, the number of developers was doubling in the world, like every 4 years. Might have been in 2006. I think I got my years wrong, but there's a pattern here. So the pattern is really what I'm trying to get across and not the details. In 2009, the number of developers was doubling about every 3 years. In 2012, it halved again. And what that means is that if the number of developers is doubling, let's say every year, that within the last 3 years, it has doubled 3 times, right? Which means that half of the developers only have 1 year experience. A third of the developers that have more experience only have 2 years experience.
Right.
And some smaller number has 3 years experience, and a very, very much smaller number has the number of years experience that my company and the people that we associate ourselves with have. So you can hire any of these companies, and chances are they can all talk the talk and make the sell and convince you that they're the right people to do it.
Right.
And they may or may not be able to accomplish your goals as readily as somebody with much more experience. In fact, I can guarantee it that the people that have failed their way to where they're at now over 10 years are not as likely to fail on your project as somebody that has failed their way for 3 years, right? And I say fail your way forward because that's what technology is. It's never been done. If you're asking us to write a project, let's say that you come to us and you want us to write a web browser. I'm going to tell you no. Why would I do that? Web browsers exist. Now, if you have some special cool, I don't know, cryptocurrency, twist to it or something like that,
Sure.
I might consider building on top of one of the open source browsers. But chances are you're not going to come to us and ask us to build you a browser. Lost my train of thought there.
Well, but I mean, are you saying that it's just been a dilution of talent?
It has, yes. I don't know if it's a delusion of talent, but yeah, sure. The half of the developers only have 1 year experience right now. Half the people that you go to have 1 year experience. That doesn't map directly to agencies if you're contacting agencies. But I'm guessing that the ratio is still the same. The ratio of agencies with a lot of experience versus, compared to companies that have 2 or 3 years experience is There's going to be a lot less of the companies with plenty of experience, which my company is.
So is the question, the first question a good consumer of software development asks is, what's your average age of, what's your average years of experience?
Yeah. How long have you been in business? Yeah. First of all, how long has your company been in business? How long have you personally been in technology? And probably a more relevant question is, how much experience does your architect have? Because development, let's just talk about that for a minute. A lot of people can develop. Right. There's a lot of people that can develop. And if I tell them, yes, create an algorithm that does A, B, C, D, they can go and do that. But if you gave them the problem and said, create a solution, chances are they will not, as a young developer, come up with the algorithm that's required. Right. They will do it some other way. Probably a simplistic way, a way that I have failed at before, and haven't for a long time because I've already learned that lesson, right. And they haven't yet. Also, if you haven't been doing this for a while, you don't know that you don't know enough, right? So this is one of the things that I ran into when I was really new in business. Was that I took on more than I actually knew how to do, right? And I hear people saying that all the time. Gary Vaynerchuk, there's quite a few people that say, look, if somebody offers you an opportunity, say yes, and then figure it out. Right. Well, I certainly did that. And we did figure it out. But I could have failed, right? And again, back to experience matters, right? I'm guessing the reasons that I have been able to overcome my challenges in business has been because I understand the technology and the architecture that works. And even a small lack of knowledge could produce magnificent problems in your project, depending on how big it is. Right. So yeah, ask that question. How old is your company? How long have you been doing it? And where are your developers at? And how do you hire them?
So the natural conclusion would be that there aren't a lot of good architects out there.
I don't think so. I don't think there are.
Because the numbers that you're saying
would people are jumping into this because of the money, not because they just love it. Right. And I think a good architect does it because they see the world differently. Right. This is where the notion of these developers that can't talk to people or are recluses comes from, right? Is because their brain works differently than most people.
Imposter syndrome and all that.
Well, imposter syndrome isn't necessarily those developers. Right. Those are the people that don't have imposter syndrome because they're not. Right. But the majority of people that go into this, they know that they don't really know what they're doing. They can figure it out. Right. And that's how most of them operate every day. I can figure it out. I can figure it out. And they can. But they can't look at the problem and go, oh, I know the best solution for that. Very few people can. Some of the people that work for us definitely can. And you know the challenges with those people, right? So,
but as a consumer of software development, those are good questions to know to ask. But the best way for me, I mean, we talked about this in previous podcasts where, we've been in the process of evaluating, lead generation companies and social media companies, and we're trying to understand how to evaluate those companies and their performance, and saying, okay, this is the way I believe we evaluate their performance is based on these metrics, whatever they are. But I wonder how we would answer the same question for somebody evaluating our service, right? Would it be, because I know, the customer, service focus, right, did what the client asked us to go build, did we build it the way that they want, right? That's a pure satisfaction question, right? But it's not as if you can add, especially if the consumer is non-technical, to say, you guys did a really good job of developing this project, I can tell by the code, right? I mean, there's no level of evaluation that you can have as to say, it really is did you create the did you deliver the vision that they had for the thing, whatever the thing was, right? Because the mechanics of how it gets done and how it works is less apparent.
It is less apparent, but it is not invisible.
No, I was very careful not to say invisible.
So the number of errors, the number of bugs, the number of time it takes you to fix bugs, the severity of the bugs, right? If you deliver a product with misspelled words in it, that's pretty good indicator that the rest of the code is broken too. So things like that, but it's harder,
right? But it's if I were to say to a person wanting to buy software development as a service, here's what I would look for in terms of knowing it, you got value. We would say the one thing would be based on what you helped create with that company, were they able to deliver it in a satisfactory manner to you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
sure.
Right?
That's a yes or no?
Yeah. And the second question would be, did they deliver it in the time that you wanted it in? Right? So I needed it to be built by X, and they got it done. Right? Is there anything beyond just those sort of like basic things that you would tell people how to evaluate?
Yes, there's a lot more than that. Yeah. First of all, I think everybody that contracts with a service like a technology company expects that company to deliver what they say they're going to deliver on time and on budget.
Right.
I think that's just the natural expectation. And so if you tell people, we will deliver it on time and on budget, and they'll say something like, yeah, you should. Right. But you're not getting any points by doing so. So where do you get your points? I guess
that's the question, right?
Yeah. And I think the points come in when you have very little bugs, right? Or when your design exceeds expectation. And like you said, that's a harder thing to see. But when I say design, I'm not talking about the design of the solution. I'm talking about the visual design, what they will see. Mm-hmm. Because that's what they're going to base their opinion on. How does it look? How does it act? How buggy is it, right? Bugs are a big, huge thing. People accept them, that they will come in there. But if you get an app that doesn't have any and it does everything you want it to do, there's a chance to make that client ecstatically happy, delighted, right? And what I would tell them to look for is the things we talked about. Do the people have the experience? Are they capable of getting the work done? Will they promise you that they'll have it done on time and on budget? And then the most important thing is, how do you communicate with them, right? Because software requires a lot of communication. Right? Most people that have a solution in mind can think of it far more easily than they can verbalize it. And it's my job and your job to get them to articulate even the details of it to the point that you can go and code it. Right. So what comes to mind right now is a syncing problem that we have with one of our projects. I call it a problem. The problem isn't that we're trying to do syncing. It's that the expectations on what syncing is between these mobile devices produce an intractable problem. We cannot sync two mobile devices where both people are updating the same data without running into problems like this. What if it is updated on one device and deleted on the other? What do we do? Right? Because they're in competition. And so the question can then be, well, which one happened last? Right? Well, okay, we can do that. But let's say that the delete happened last. And it was the wrong thing to do, right? So how do we do that, right? There's questions that we have to ask our clients to find out exactly what do you mean by syncing. And not only do we have to ask the right questions, we have to prune those expectations as they become intractable problems. Right. We can't sync between two phones unless we know one phone is more right than the other.
Right.
Right. So again, how do we know that? Right. And if the client can't answer, then you're going to have to say, well, you need to rethink it, or let me propose a solution.
I think brings up that topic in and of itself has made me think a lot about this concept of saying no to clients, right? I think there are a lot of there's a lot of hesitation that, I mean, it kind of depends on who you are, I suppose, but in a service related model, a lot of what you're presented to by a client is, this is the problem that I want you to solve. Your inclination as the service provider is to say, I want to figure that out, right?
Yes.
I can solve that problem. You bet. So you're inclined not to say no. But one of the things that I've learned in working, in the software development area is, we're more comfortable with our ability to say no.
You mean illumisoft?
Yeah.
I have actually found it endearing,
right,
to people. People, really? You're not going to just try and sell us? Yeah, we can do anything you want for any amount you want. We can do it right now.
Right.
No, we can't. And no, we won't.
Right. And so some of the other service related industries that I've been in, legal technology, whatever they were, the idea that you would say no to a client was like, it wasn't that we had never said no. We just said no in a different way, right? We would say, no, we're going to go build it a little differently than the way that maybe achieve the goal, but differently than the way you've described it. That's really a no.
Well, I do that too. What a better way would be this.
Right.
I mean, I honestly do believe that when I sit across the table from a vendor, a potential vendor, either lead gen or whatever else I'm hiring for, if they tell me no, it shows that they're confident. Right. And it makes me trust them more. Right. Which goes back to the question you asked me, is like, what should you be looking for if you're hiring a company? You got to hire somebody that you can get along with interpersonally and that you trust.
Right.
If you catch them in any kind of lie or misstatement, you need to dig in deeper with that, because it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, one of the notes that I had on here, which is just kind of funny, Dan, was to talk about how we build trust. And I think that more recently, and again, learning from our experience with finding a lead generation company and social media company, is the way we know for a fact the way you don't build trust. And the one way you do that really quickly, especially in an early relationship, is not delivering what you said you were going to do. And the most basic example that I can give is during a conversation that we had with a lead generation company, or maybe this was on the social media company, that they said very simply, they just said, we're going to deliver you a report every Friday. The first Friday came, the first Friday went.
And there was no
report. Right? Immediately, and maybe we shouldn't extrapolate from that some bigger problem, but immediately in our minds, we go, well, wait a second.
That's a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in our version of that, delivering, if we say to you, we're gonna do releases to your mobile app every Friday.
Right.
If Friday comes and goes, there's no word from us that you are not going to get your release, then that's the same reaction that our clients are going to have, is you said you were going to do this and this didn't happen. Right.
I agree. And I think that it requires a lot of communication, because we can't guarantee that we can always do what we try to do. This is like back to what I was saying a while ago. It's never been done before. So we may or may not be able to do it.
Right.
And we certainly cannot guarantee that we can do it within a certain amount of time.
Right.
We try really hard. Yes, I think we can do that.
Right.
I never guarantee that we can do anything. I'm pretty confident we can do it.
Right.
And those people that I see that do guarantee those things hardly ever are able to accomplish them. But so there's competitors out there. right? Some of them will say no. Some of them will point you in the right direction and say, no, if you do it this way, we can probably get it done. But some of them don't. I've lost many a bid to people that underbid something because they know that they just want to build a relationship and then change the project as it goes, change orders. And I'm going to guess that their product is really going to cost the same amount of money, whether I build it or somebody else builds it. But if they go with a cheaper amount, it feels better in the moment. And then as prices raise and, costs soar, they deal with it because they've already gotten into bed with this person, and getting out of that relationship is
difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult, and you typically lose most of what you invested.
So a company that says to you, well, again, going back to our example, lead gen, if somebody comes to us and says, we guarantee you 100 leads a month, is the equivalent, could be the equivalent of a company like us saying, we promise to deliver you bug-free software. That should immediately also cause a red flag, right? Because it doesn't seem within the realm of reality, right?
Yep. So you should definitely ask that company, hold on here.
Right.
You said you could deliver 100 leads a month. Nobody does that.
Right.
Yep, I can do it.
Right.
Hold them to it. Right. That's exactly what happened to us.
Right.
Only the problem with us was that the definition of lead was altered. Right. That's why, he promised what he promised, and we expected what we expected. And in my opinion, that was on him. Mm-hmm. Right. Because when I said to him, nobody is doing that. Right. He knew at that moment that my definition of a lead was not what his definition of a lead was, but he allowed us to continue down that path. Right. That's dishonest, in my opinion. Mm. So, but it's a nuance. And if you ever catch us in a lie, if any of our clients or prospective clients ever catch us in a lie, I hope they don't do business with us.
All right.
First of all, I hope we never are in a lie. Right. We shouldn't lie to get business, right? That's just not
really who we are.
It's not who we are. But if a client ever questions us and we get to the point that their definition of a word is different than our definition of a word and it changes the relationship, I think we should fix it. But we should definitely put a stake in the ground right there and determine if we still want to do business with each other, because any level of misunderstanding or, a definition is incorrect means that you're not talking the same language. You're not looking at the same things. You need to stop and make sure you're on the same page with that vendor before you go further.
Right.
And that's why I think we need to take a lot of time in communication in technology. It's not just that it takes a lot of effort to get you to articulate what your expectations are. It's that it requires a lot of communication to be able to get to know somebody well enough to make decisions on their behalf as you go, as you head down the technology path.
Right.
Because nobody wants their technology guy to call them 10 times a day and ask them, hey, should this if statement produce a true or a false?
Right. But conversely, I do think on the other side of things, if somebody claims to say, I'm going to deliver you bug-free software, and that's a red flag because that's not a reality. But on the flip side of that, if somebody is delivering you, what's the right level of bugs to deliver to it? In other words, if I'm the guy who's hiring you and I'm getting it and I'm like, I don't know, is this too many or is this right. I don't know how to evaluate. All I know is my clients are using it and it doesn't seem to work consistently. That could be one bug, that could be 100 bugs.
Right.
Where's the point in which they come back to you and they say, this is just not working?
My guess is, I think the question is, what is the correct level of, what should a client expect as far as the level of bugs or, anomalies within there. And I would say very little. If the company that you're dealing with has done their job, then they know what you want. They know without any ambiguity what it is that you want. They may not know everything that they need to know, because as you start developing something, you get to a point and we go, oh, we can do it this way or we can do it that way, and it's really not my call. We should ask the client.
Right.
And they should come back to you and explain enough about it that you can make a decision. But nobody wants their developer to say, okay, I understand, and then come back to, oh, so what was that you wanted here? And now that we're in here, what was the menu? I mean, nobody wants to have to detail out the project for you to that level. They can't.
Right.
It's like my accountant asking me how I want to categorize an expense. Right. I need you to tell me how to categorize that expense, not me to tell you, unless I have some in-depth knowledge, right? And I'm trying to do my books a little bit funny.
Sure.
Right. But other than that, I need you to be the expert and tell me. I think as technologists, we need to be the expert and make all the decisions that we can make in our client's best interest because we know what they want. And
defining which ones you can and you can't make are crucial, right? Because there's the gray line, right, where we do want to be the experts and make the decisions and we feel confident we understand what the client wants, that we know we can make those decisions for them. But there is the gray line of saying maybe we made one too many decisions for them that we shouldn't have.
Well, so to me, there's a very clear distinction between decisions we can make and decisions that we can't. And I think what it comes down to is if the decision is arbitrary and it affects the result, then that's a decision that the client makes. If we get to a point where, well, we can do it this way or we can do it that way, and it's all that both of them will produce the result that the client asked for, but there is some nuance to it, right? This one will produce a red result and this one will produce a pink result. And they never really said what color they cared for.
Right.
So let's ask them.
Right.
But if they asked for a pink result and you get to chartreuse and you say, are you sure you want it pink? Because we've got chartreuse. That's not a good question.
Right.
In fact, that's somebody that didn't listen to you or couldn't produce the result. And now they're trying to push you into what they did produce.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a key point too, which is that, that whole conundrum of, I didn't really listen to you. I thought I knew what was best for you, so I produced this. You should like it. Right. So, I mean, I feel like that's a more common occurrence than what we should have. But in terms of not necessarily us, but the industry maybe. But I've
actually had that happen to me from one of our vendors.
Yeah.
I asked him for one thing and he listened intently and produced something significantly different. And when I asked him why, and it was a good that he produced it, but it wasn't what I asked for. In fact, it had gone way beyond what I asked for, to the point where I could not then use it. And it was like he was overzealous, right? And I heard him say this, so
what he really meant.
Yes. He thought he knew what I really meant, and what I really wanted was something bigger and more, and he produced it. And I thought, well, that's great that you understood me that well, but it completely sucks that you did this when I didn't ask you to, because I didn't want you to either. And I paid him to do this work, and it wasn't what I asked for. So there needs to be some, if he had spent more time asking me what I wanted, he would have known that I did not want him to do that.
But one of it's a small technique, but the whole affirmation is probably not the right word. If he had simply just said, I listened to you, Dan, this is what I understand you want me to go build. Here it is in writing. I'm delineating it out for you. Is that correct? And then you would have said no. Right. You would have had an opportunity to say no before he went out and executed it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think we do that. I mean, at least I know we do a lot of, at least initially, the first time we engage with people, we do a pretty good job at detailing out what we consider to be features or MVPs. And we try to do a good job even in our proposal stages with the statement of work, trying to be as, detailed down to the right level so that we're in agreement as to what it is that they want us to go build. But I always think that the work's not done there, right? It's you still have to, as you go through the project, keep the same level of cadence going on, which says, you asked me to go build this thing. I'm explaining back to you that I understand this is what I'm going to go build. I mean, that's the cadence that has to keep happening. And, to be honest, we've fallen short in some cases where we could have done a better job.
That's the failures that I was talking about earlier. We've hit the wall before.
Right.
We failed before, and we have learned how not to do that again.
Right.
So it hurts me to say that because I don't want to ever be a failure. Nobody does. But it's better to have failed and overcome than to not know there's a pothole in front of you that you're going to step in.
Right. Well, just to have failed and not learned.
Yeah. Mixed analogies, but you know what I mean.
I do. I do. Well, that's interesting because that was actually touched on a couple of the different topics that I had written down for today. Let's see if I had anything else. So that was some of the stuff.
That's good. We're just a little bit over 2 hours, so that's that's a pretty good stopping point. I thought it was a really good conversation.
Yeah, I do too. I think maybe next time, one of the things I wanted to talk about, only because I'm personally kind of excited about it.
Trump disappearing?
No. Well, no.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I don't want him to disappear, but he did claim that he was going to be absent for a while because there's very wealthy people that don't like what he's doing.
Why do they have to be wealthy?
I don't know, because maybe he thinks they have power. I don't know. He might have said powerful.
Yeah.
But either way, that's kind of scary to think. But it is also revealing, because I've said for a long time, something else is controlling our government because our parties are too much alike. They're more alike than different. And yes, they each have their what do you call them? They each have their distinct approaches to things, but the actions that they take are more similar than they're different. The results that they produce are more similar than they're different. And the fact that they're attacking each other so vehemently and they won't get anything done together means that they're enemies of the American people. Anyway, the Trump disappearing thing is worrisome.
Gotcha.
He's our president.
Right.
Right. If somebody takes him out, it's going to let all of us know all of a sudden that our government isn't the world power that we thought it was.
Right.
Something is, but it's not that. I'm worried to see what happens with that.
Yeah, I didn't catch that until you told me that when I walked in. So,
yeah.
What I was hoping to talk about next time was our the release of this IDTA app. I personally was very involved with that project and kind of excited to at least talk briefly about it next time.
Cool.
Maybe.
Let's do a little case study.
Yeah.
And
so I think that's going to be a very interesting project for a number of different reasons we can talk about next time. So.
If you found this podcast interesting at all, please share it with your friends. We have very few followers at this point.
Go to
podcast number 5.
Go to LinkedIn, click the follow button.
Yeah, absolutely. www.linkedin.com/company/illumisoft.
Right. And then in the near future, this is podcast number 5, but in the very near future that they'll be made available, right?
Yes, they're published now, actually, just on Buzzsprout, but we will also syndicate them out to the different platforms, and we also will be putting our videos of these podcasts on YouTube on our illumisoft channel.
Gotcha.
So
all right,
fun
well,
stuff.
Until then, next week, right?
All right, bye.
All right.